The Washington Post published a five-part series on race, and it's compelling, thought-provoking, powerful, eye-opening, riveting. I could say so many great things, but I'm sure if you've heard about the project, you've heard none of that. You've probably only heard negative things, and that's coming from people who identify as not racist, people who are predominantly white. In fact, I've only heard white people say negative things about this series, but it has the power to dismantle racism and advance conversations about a more equitable nation, a more equitable America. And so I guess I'm not surprised that it has been ridiculed and attacked, and to the point where not just the project is attacked, but the people in it have been attacked as well. I want you guys to take a listen to Tucker Carlson from Fox News after he went on a show. He played a few clips from the series. This was his response.
This is really sick, and it's a complete dead end that will tank the country if we allow it to continue. Everyone is created equal in the eyes of God, and if you don't act that way and judge people based on who they are and what they do, the choices they make, and instead judge them on the color of their skin, it's over. That's very obvious. It's been obvious to people for a long time. In fact, it was universally acknowledged up until about 20 minutes ago.
When you think about that, right? If you judge them by anything, and you only judge them by the color of their skin, then it's over. But that's what's been happening to Black people all across America for centuries. And so the fact that that is his response when a group of individuals, and this was not exclusive to Black people. When you watch the series, there are a number of white scholars who are engaged in this conversation, who share their own experiences around race and identity. And they share encouragement for their white brothers and sisters to have this reckoning within themselves as well. And so for him to say that, it's very disturbing. He wasn't, Tucker Carlson wasn't the only one to respond on the Washington Post's new series called The New Normal. Ben Shapiro had a field day with it. In fact, he dedicated an entire episode to it. Check out this clip.
This is racist crap, because here's the Washington Post lead story yesterday. Again, from Washington Post, The Lily. But for these folks, like Nicole Ellis of the Washington Post, it is important that you understand your white identity. What they mean is they're going to cudgel you into an identity where you are responsible for all the evils of the world. You're responsible for the George Floyd situation. And first of all, when Resmaa Menakem, at the very beginning, an author, when he says at the beginning, there are thousands of George Floyds you never saw. Well, I mean, under what time context are we talking? Are we talking like the last several hundred years? Because then that's true. Are you talking about like the last several years? The answer, of course, is no. The number of Black unarmed men killed in the United States by cops is under 20 every single year. So no, it's not thousands of people who are being treated the way that George Floyd was treated. Okay, but again, the idea is that pointing out that incident, which again was not even like, there's still no evidence. It's amazing how this has been promulgated. There's still no evidence that was a racist incident. It was not alleged in court. It was not alleged by the federal government. It's been alleged by no one. And yet that has become the racial incident in America, despite the fact that there's no racial animus sought. Why? Because it's structural.
So I have a lot to say there. Number one, Ben Shapiro, he says he called out Resmaa Menakem, who was a guest that we actually had on our show a few weeks back. He's a New York Times bestselling author, and called him out because in this five-part series, Resmaa says, for the thousands of other George Floyds. So Ben makes a point that there's only 20 unarmed Black men killed each year. That's a lie. That's not factual. There are more than 700 Black men killed each year by police, or Black men and women. And when you aggregate that over the last just 5 years, it's well over 1,000. Ben, as you're hearing all of this, I know that you haven't really had a ton of time to watch this series by the Washington Post, but right. I mean, this response is very similar to the response that we're seeing about critical race theory. It's very similar to the response that we saw about the 1619 Project. And what it does for me is it makes me think about Kaepernick.
Yeah.
When he took a knee, and just that was his simple, peaceful way to protest and demand police accountability. And the country went up in arms about it. How dare you disrespect our country? That's so un-American of you. And then when people took to the streets and set the 3rd precinct on fire, then they look back at Kaepernick and they were like, well, maybe we should have listened to him. So it brings me to this place of, if we can't talk about critical race theory in schools, if we can't do the 1619 Project and pull out all of the history, if we can't go to the Washington, where is a good place to have conversations about race? And how can we do it in a way that doesn't offend white people?
There is no acceptable form of protest. There will never be any acceptable form of protest. No matter what we do, Ben Shapiro is paid to find something wrong with it and to make it sound like he has a reasonable, logical argument against it. But really what he's doing is putting us in a race to the bottom in terms of what is acceptable. And this is in context of what you're saying, Georgia. So now they look back at Colin Kaepernick and say, okay, well, maybe we should have listened to you when you took a knee. Well, yeah, maybe you should have. But maybe you should have listened to us before people died. Maybe you should listen to us before friends of ours die. Maybe you should listen to us before loved ones die. So at what point are you going to listen to us, Ben Shapiro? But what they've shown us is that there's no point that they will listen, that they're never going to listen to us because there's no acceptable form of protest.
Now, Resma and we had a conversation about this yesterday, and I asked him, do you regret being a part of this project? Has the Washington Post responded at all? Or do they plan to pull the series? As of right now, the Washington Post hasn't responded at all, but take a listen to what Resma had to say. He doesn't regret being a part of this series. In fact, he feels that this is a sign that it is doing exactly what it was created to do. And this was his direct response to when white people have this negative, resistant response to simple conversations about race. Take a listen.
This article or this whole project has done, it said, just like the 1619 Project, it says, your comfort is not my concern. The way that you see the world is the way that you see the world. You get to do that, but it is not my concern. And the way that you see the world is going to get everybody hurt. The way that you see the world will continue to have people like what happened on January 6th, where you had thousands of people decide that they were going to go into the Capitol and pee and crap all over the floor and hurt people and murder people. That if white bodies don't begin to culturally begin to access what they need to do in order to excavate and interrogate where all of that rage comes from, because the rage can't come from me. It can't be because of me. The rage has to be investigated. And I think what this thing has the capacity to do is to have people begin to search and look and in an embodied way begin to say, okay, why is it that I always go to this place? Why is it that I always look for Black bodies and indigenous bodies to blow all of this horror and terror through? What construction was made in order for me to be all right with taking indigenous land and then putting indigenous people in boarding schools and putting indigenous children in boarding schools and then taking their land and genociding them and then saying that I was a settler and that I have dominion over all else and all other things? How did that come to pass? And until white people begin to work on those pieces and stop trying to work on me and start working on each other, there ain't nothing that I can do about it. But what I can say is for Black and indigenous people, the things that you feel to be right in this, in your bones, in your spirit, in your soul, what I want to say to you is that it is absolutely and 100% true.
You guys got to go check out the series, The New Normal. It's a powerful series, and it really has the opportunity to spark these conversations. And it's simply just that, just conversations about race in America, the ones that are needed for us to gain understanding, for us to find that common ground so we can move forward. And so it's frustrating when you see so much resistance to just simply having a conversation. There's nothing wrong with sitting down and talking about how race has impacted you and what's needed to advance our society. So Brother Resma, New York Times bestselling author, also, if you haven't checked out his book, very powerful book called My Grandmother's Hands. He's an expert at dealing with trauma, historical trauma. And you heard him there say, you know, this series was not created to ensure the comfortability of white people. And so as soon as you start pushing the envelope, what he was saying, even to break it down further, is if you're white and you listen to this series and you get uncomfortable and your first response is to attack people of color, you need to examine that.
Period.
Why is that your first response? Why is your first response when you're uncomfortable and it's due to the words of a person of color? Why is your first response to attack them? And the same thing could be asked about Kaepernick, because he really didn't do anything wrong. He really didn't do anything wrong. In fact, if that form of protesting were encouraged, if this type of forum and platform and space would be encouraged, imagine how much that would eliminate. And it's, you know, we saw this happen in so many cities where there had to be this militarized approach to quelling protests, and how much resources that wasted. But if we could be okay, if we could make this the new normal, that's what the series is called. Let's make it the new normal to sit down and have conversations, have uncomfortable, tough conversations that move the needle forward on race and equity in America. Let's sit down and have conversations. Imagine how far we could get with eliminating Karenism in our country. Imagine how far we could get with the people who are so emotionally distraught about teaching critical race theory in school that they are showing up to school board meetings crying as though someone has violently attacked their child, when in fact, none of that has happened. The only thing that has happened is that you have scholars who are saying, let's stop teaching our children that Christopher Columbus discovered America, and let's just tell them the truth.
My God. I'm sorry. I forgot where we were, because Sister Georgia, that is so spot on. And it is the fact that they can't face the truth. What critical race theory gets at, and again, I want to be sure that now critical race theory is growing into being something more than even what the original scholars intended. I don't think the original scholars intended it to be a catch-all designation for the frontline offense against white supremacy. I don't think that they would want it to be that, but I think that they would be okay if it grew into that. That said, this is what they're fighting. This is why Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro are all hands on deck here. It's because what critical race theory or this thinking does is that it exposes the truth to white people. For people from the biblical persuasion, think of it this way. This is an antidote that would have made Pharaoh see himself, right? From any other persuasion, just think of it in terms of this is the critical analysis skill set that is necessary for white folks to see white supremacy. It is revealing the wizard behind the curtain. And this is why they can't handle it, because it reveals too much truth. Exactly what you said, Georgia.
And another part of that commentary by Ben Shapiro, after he made a lie and said that less than 20 unarmed Black men are killed each year by police, he also said that there's been no evidence that George Floyd's murder was racially motivated. No evidence. So, you mean to tell me if George Floyd was a white man with a counterfeit $20 bill, that he would have just he wouldn't have just gotten a citation? Yeah. Also, let me ask you this. What evidence was there that the Duluth lynchings in 1920, the 3 circus workers who were falsely accused of rape, who were lynched, what evidence was there that was racially motivated? What evidence was there? Was there evidence for any of the lynchings that ever happened? So if there wasn't, should we dismiss them and say that they weren't racially motivated because the person who hung them and killed them didn't call them the N-word? I mean, what evidence do you need in order to classify something as racially motivated? And when you see a white officer abusing their power, going against all of their training, inflicting bodily harm on the body of a Black man, not for 1 minute, not for 2 minutes, but for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Why would you dismiss that and minimize it and just say, oh, he's just a bad apple. You know, he was just not a good guy. When, in fact, the Department of Justice is investigating not just Derek Chauvin, but the entire Minneapolis Police Department, and has also brought federal civil rights violation charges against Derek Chauvin because he has also been extremely violent against other Black people. So why? I mean, and I think that's why Resma's comment was so powerful to me, because he was like, you know, the white people, when your first response is to lash out and attack Black people when they're saying things that make you uncomfortable, you need to examine you. That's work you need to do, not work that we need to do.
Absolutely. It's a threat to their power, though, Georgia. It is a threat to their power in so much as that if the truth is told, if the history is told by the oppressed, the number one thing that Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, the white Christian men that Bill O'Reilly talked about, the number one threat to their power is the truth. And so the reason they react that way whenever they hear anything of the sort of critical race theory is because they know that truth is destructive to the system. And so this is the system trying to protect itself. I like to think of it as the death pangs of white supremacy, because I don't think that they can handle the truth. They can't stop the truth.
Well, and speaking of George Floyd, we know that sentencing happens tomorrow. I found out yesterday that I will be inside of the courtroom for the sentencing. So make sure you guys tune in tomorrow. We'll have some coverage surrounding that. But, you know, hearing Ben Shapiro say that there's no evidence that this was a racially motivated attack, there's no evidence of that. You know, I started asking myself, where would America be if George Floyd never went to Cup Foods? What would have happened if George Floyd never had a counterfeit $20 bill? Would America ever have been reckoned with this deep-rooted racial hate that really has been holding us back for decades? Because it was the first time in my lifetime where I saw serious conversation, serious attempts by corporations to reconcile, serious debates within Congress and even here within the House and the Senate, conversations around reparations. It's the first time. But what would have happened if George Floyd didn't have a counterfeit $20 bill? Where would we be in America in terms of the conversation around race?
Yeah.
Where would we be? Because the reality of it is the cost of the advancement of these conversations was George Floyd's blood.
That's exactly what was laying on my heart just now. That exact thing. Wow.
And even though we have yet to see tangible change, George Floyd Policing Act bill still not passed. Qualified immunity is still a thing here, even in the city where he was killed. We're waiting to see if the governor can pass the 8 pieces of legislation on police accountability that were presented by community organizers. We have all the way up until about June 30th because we're in a special session. No tangible change yet. It's been more than a year. Sentencing for Derek Chauvin is tomorrow. This is going to be a chapter in our past here very soon. And we are still facing as much resistance in just having simple conversations, Ben.
Yeah. Because if they can delay us at this level of analysis, at this level of conversation, if Tucker Carlson, who said it? I was speaking with Professor Carl Hart of Columbia University, and I believe he was quoting Toni Morrison. I could be wrong, but he was speaking of one brilliant sister who said that the purpose of racism is to slow you down. And that's what Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro are doing here. Their job is to slow down the national discourse so that we can apply the appropriate unified pressure on the White House to get things done that we need done as a result of the black vote. And now the black vote is directly under attack. And here we are having conversations about critical race theory, when at the end of the day, it should be just a conversation about what is the truth about history. You cannot get the truth about history without hearing from the voice of the oppressed, period.
And how many of us still don't know who represents us in Congress? And how many of us still don't know who represents us on a state level? How many people still don't know who represents us in terms of just our city, our local government, to pick up the phone and make that call? But we follow and we're subscribed to Tucker Carlson and we get all up in arms and worked up. But what you gonna do about it?
I mean, facts is facts, man.
What you gonna do about it?
Like, at the end of the day, here we are. White folks, this is your time to shine. This is your time to step up and say, okay, what kind of future do we want? Do we want a future that is tied in with people who would march up the steps of the democracy because they couldn't get their Orange Julius back in the White House? You're going to tie your future with your cousins, or are you going to tie your future with your long lost cousins? Well, we weren't lost. We just kind of got, sent away from you know what I'm saying? The point is like, you could either go with the rational or the irrational. Let your racism keep leading the way, and you're going to find yourself with the destruction of this American democratic experiment, period.
And if we ever needed a white savior,
I mean,
they always say that, allies sometimes suffer with a white savior complex. I don't need one. Let me just be clear. I don't need one, but Ben Shapiro does. Ben Shapiro does. So please, anybody who prides himself in being the hero and being the savior, please go help this man. And I think he is deeply disturbed. This whole episode that he did, I watched most of it, and there was a portion even where he was like, I'm Jewish, but only because my mom and religious reasons. And what is white identity? There's no such thing as white identity. We identify with where we came from. So if you're from Germany, you're German. If you're from Poland, you're Polish. If you're from Russia, you're Russian. The only time people are identified as white is as an opponent of being black in America. And, I said, wow, I wish I had that privilege. I wish I had the privilege to know that I was Nigerian or South African or Ethiopian. But guess what? I don't have that privilege because my ancestors were stolen. My country that my ancestors came from was colonized. And so in order for me to know and identify not as black, but as specifically as it relates to my ancestors, I have to dig and search and dig and look and do DNA testing and all of these things. And there's still no guarantee that I'm going to find it because white settlers were so successful in stealing our identity that we don't have the privilege to even simply know who we are.
Unless we give them our DNA right now, then they can, tell us then. But now we got to give up our preach, Georgia.
And so it's not only been stolen, but hidden so deep. We can't find a trace of our ancestral heritage unless we put something in our body and take something out and send it off to a lab somewhere to be tested. And then we're still trusting in this system, because that is science that they've built, to tell us the truth. I could go on and on. I could go on. We're on the clock. And I know that we are running out of time here. So if you guys want to check out the full-length interview with Resmaa Menakem, New York Times bestselling author who participated in The New Normal, a 5-part series by the Washington Post on race, you can head over to my YouTube channel and check that out. And for those of you watching, make sure you stick around for more on The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Good morning, people. It's your boy DJ Exclusive. Y'all like it or not, it's coming up next. Make sure you grab your coffee, your tea, your soda, your drink, whatever it is you need to get your morning started, y'all. Like it or not, it's coming up next. Let's go.
Some people say money gets you everything, but it don't make me happy. It's not the reason my heart sings. It's what I've got. You couldn't put a price on that, 'cause I got something real. I got something real. 'Cause I got love, love. Yeah, yeah. I got love, love. Yeah, yeah. I got love. Yeah, yeah. I got love. Yeah, yeah. Some people cruise, some people try to get tired. If you don't have a reason, it's hard to make it all worthwhile. 'Cause what I've got surely makes the world go round.
No human is good morning. I appreciate that love.